Football is passion.
I don't believe it! What a goal we have just seen from Roberto Carlos! It's Messi! Oh, what a goal! Again! Oh, come on!
Football is goals, but also football is tactics. We live in an era where tactical preparation is becoming increasingly important. Yes, that's a fact, but that doesn't mean that coaches in the past weren't even more innovative in their approaches. That's why today we're going to explore the evolution of the 8 most influential football tactics in history, starting with the oldest, the famous counter-attacking football, led by Herbert Chapman and his favourite WM formation. At the beginning of the 20th century, the game was chaotic. Football was not the science fiction it is today. Nope. Players didn't have fixed positions on the pitch, and everyone was free to roam wherever their skills best suited them. And here comes the fundamental role of Herbert Chapman, a revolutionary mind who turned strategy into an art. In order for him to do this, however, there was a major change in the offside rule. Before 1925, a player was offside unless there were 3 players from the opposing team in front of him. This rule was changed in the mid-1920s, reducing the number of opposing players required from 3 to 2. With this change, Chapman seized the opportunity to change the game. He introduced the WM formation, a 3-2-2-3 that provided balance, structure, and devastating counter-attacking power. The WM worked like this: 3 defenders formed a solid wall at the back, while 2 deep-lying midfielders shielded them. In front of them, 2 more midfielders linked defence with attack, creating a launch pad for the 3 forwards up top. It wasn't just defensive, it was revolutionary. With the WM, Chapman turned Arsenal into a winning machine. With him at the helm, the Gunners enjoyed their first era of supremacy, triumphing with 3 English First Division titles, 1 FA Cup, and 3 Community Shields. The secret of their success lay in the rapid transitions and lightning-fast combinations between the midfielders that Chapman created in the middle of the park. On the other hand, if Chapman redefined structure, Brazil's fullbacks redefined freedom. In the 1950s, Nilton Santos showed that defenders didn't have to stay put, they could attack. And they did it quite successfully. And the first coach in history to use this strategy like no other was Vicente Feola, the man who led Brazil to their first World Cup title in 1958, and rest assured, Santos played a clear part in that. Fast forward 12 years and we have another coach-player duo who understood this perfectly. It was the legendary Mario Zagallo and Carlos Alberto. They took the idea of attacking fullback to the next level, culminating in Alberto's goal in the 1970s World Cup final. But the revolution didn't stop there. After the 60s and 70s, the 90s and 2000s were the next iconic era for Brazilian football. And coincidence or not, in both eras, the overlapping fullbacks were instrumental in Brazil's triumphs. This time, it was Cafu and Roberto Carlos, who carried on the great idea of Santos and Alberto. Cafu's tireless stamina made him Brazil's driving force, and he was a constant source of crosses from the byline. Roberto Carlos, meanwhile, added flair and power, while his thunderous free kicks became as memorable as his overlapping runs. And speaking of revolution and future-proofing, this tactic proved so influential that even the fullbacks of the mid-2020s are using the same approach. The likes of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Achraf Hakimi, for example, embody the attack-defense hybrid perfectly. Next up, the Catenaccio, the long-established and classic football tactic that many describe as old-fashioned park the bus. First of all, the Catenaccio originated in Italy in the 1950s as a defensive philosophy that turned football into a game of chess. Yes, that's right, that was the explanation given by top football tacticians for the ideology. And the father of this highly effective idea was Helenio Herrera, the legendary Argentinian best known for his time at Inter Milan. The basic idea was to place a sweeper, also known as a libero, behind the back line. The system was designed to neutralise attacking threats while striking with ruthless efficiency on the counter-attack. Herrera and the Nerazzurri subsequently became synonymous with the Catenaccio, dominating Serie A and winning back-to-back European Cups in 1964 and 1965. Catenaccio wasn't just defence, it was discipline, strategy, and a touch of pragmatism for Herrera. By the end of the 20th century, however, it faded into obscurity as attacking tactics became more prevalent. Nevertheless, his influence never disappeared. Modern managers such as Diego Simeone and Jose Mourinho have taken his core principles, structured defense, compact lines and counter-attacking, and adapted them for today's dynamic game. Yes, the Catenaccio was a revolution, but nothing comes close to total football in terms of its impact on the game as a whole. When it was introduced in the 1970s by Rinus Michels, the game underwent a radical transformation. The basic idea was a constant and seamless change of positions, prioritizing space, movement, and adaptability. The system relied on intelligent players capable of playing multiple roles and creating a fluidity. At the heart of this revolution was Johan Cruyff, Michels' on-field general and the embodiment of total football. Whether scoring, creating, or orchestrating from midfield, Cruyff turned the philosophy into a living, breathing art form. It wasn't just Ajax that flourished. Michels and Cruyff took total football to the Netherlands, where they reached the 1974 World Cup final. Less than 15 years later, Michels returned to the national team, this time to win the 1988 Euros. This iconic philosophy, which has gone down as the most influential football tactic in history, didn't stop there. Managers such as Arsene Wenger, Marcelo Bielsa, and Pep Guardiola have all drawn inspiration from Michels' idea, with Bielsa often citing total football as the blueprint for his relentless tactical innovations. Of course, Johan Cruyff wouldn't have become the player he was without Michels, but he had too high a footballing IQ to be incapable of improving on Michels' idea, and so the tiki-taka was born. After turning to coach, Johan Cruyff bridged the eras of bringing Michels' philosophy to Barcelona in the late 1980s. As a manager, Cruyff introduced a strictly possession-based game that emphasized short, quick passes, control, and relentless movement. His dream team won 4 successive La Liga titles and the 1992 European Cup, cementing Cruyff's place as both student and innovator of Michels' legacy. And well, you know the rest. If Cruyff created the tiki-taka, it was Pep Guardiola who took it to the next level. Actually, he didn't just raise it to another level, he made it a phenomenon. At Barcelona, Guardiola's system revolved around Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, and Messi. It wasn't just about possession, it was about dominating space and smothering opponents with passing triangles. It was a philosophy that propelled Barcelona to multiple Champions League titles and Spain to European and World Cup triumphs between 2008 and 2012. Pep then moved on to Bayern Munich and ended up in England, where his favourite tiki-taka collided with his biggest nightmare, Jurgen Klopp's Gegenpressing. This is another tactic that comes from filtering the principles of total football, but unlike Cruyff and Guardiola, who chose to implement the attacking fundamentals of total football into their own interpretations, Klopp focuses on the defensive ones. Yes, there's no clear evidence that Klopp was the first to implement counter-pressing, but he was certainly the first to use it at such a high level, at Borussia Dortmund and then at Liverpool. Put simply, Gegenpressing requires teams to press aggressively immediately after losing possession, with the aim of winning the ball back high up the pitch. And as we saw a minute ago in total football, the defensive approach is similar. With the disclaimer, of course, that counter-pressing is far more conservative than the constant pressing in total football, which puts the entire defensive line at extreme risk. That's why it's worth noting that Klopp had adapted Michels' idea, but added efficiency and structure. His teams don't just press for the sake of pressing, they press with purpose, targeting specific zones and triggers to suffocate the opposition. And yes, Guardiola certainly suffered a lot from this in the 2019-20 season, when Liverpool won the Premier League, beating Man City by 18 points. But then, during the 2020-21 season, the footballing genius of Josep Guardiola struck back. The false 9. For those of you who followed that season closely, you may remember that it was Sergio Aguero's last season as a Citizen, and Guardiola wanted to adapt the team for the times without him. That's why he implemented an old idea of his, the false 9, by playing Phil Foden in that role. But instead of staying in the box to finish off goal-scoring chances like a typical number 9, the false 9 drops into midfield, draws defenders out of position and creates space for his teammates. At the age of 20, this remains the second best season in Foden's career in terms of attacking returns, 16 goals and 10 assists. He was magical in that role, but he wasn't the first left-footed prodigy to be deployed in that position under Pep. Enter Leo Messi. When he arrived at Barcelona in 2008, Guardiola had a brilliant striker in Samuel Eto'o, and Messi was the ideal player to create space. In the summer of 2009, however, Eto'o left for Inter Milan and Zlatan Ibrahimovic arrived at the Camp Nou. Everyone expected Zlatan to fill the same role as Eto'o, but it wasn't to be, as Ibrahimovic lacked the mobility and tactical awareness to perform in the way Guardiola wanted. So Pep decided to get rid of him and use him as a rotational player, with Messi as a number 9 in his place. But it wasn't long before everyone realised that Messi was no ordinary number 9. He was constantly moving, dropping deep to receive the ball, dribbling, creating chances, and most importantly, opening up space for wingers Pedri and David Villa to exploit. And the rest, combined with the aforementioned tiki-taka, is history. And now for the tactic that every Barca fan has fallen in love with since the start of the season: the offside trap. The arrival of Hansi Flick heralded a new era at the Catalan Giants. At first, he was seen as a man with a very different view of the game from the Barca DNA, but with time we can see that he actually has a lot in common with the fast-paced game we saw under Xavi and the high pressing of the Cruyff era. Even Flick himself has admitted that he learnt from Cruyff's ideology in his early days as a coach. All in all, everything under Flick has been spectacular so far. The transitions, the fluidity of Lamine Yamal and Pedri, the role of the fullbacks, but the one thing that has undoubtedly caught the eye is the offside trap. Yes, of course, this is not something that Flick himself introduced, but the idea of how and when to use it is truly revolutionary. To be successful with the offside trap, he has to be sure that the flag will be raised when the offside occurs. And this is where the video assisted referee comes in. Flick simply trusts the system 100% and decides to play his defensive line as high as possible, which has made Barcelona incredibly effective in this area. In El Clasico, the flag was raised 11 times, with Mbappe the biggest victim, caught offside on 8 of those occasions. And most interestingly of all, Flick had 2 of the fastest players in the world, Vini Jr. and Mbappe, against him, yet still opted for this tactic. With everything that's been said in the last 10 plus minutes, it's safe to say that football is evolving by leaps and bounds, and that new and novel tactics will soon be on the horizon. But one thing is for sure, each of these 8 approaches will be on the agenda, more or less forever. What other revolutionary tactics did we miss? Don't hesitate to give us a clue in the comments below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, or check out our latest upload, which you can see on your screen right now. Catch you there.